First story. We lost our baby girl and I cried in front of my wife. And she said I had no right to grieve. Accused me of making my angel's death about me. And then told me how I should be the man and support her. My wife and I have been together and married for 6 years. 2. We always wanted children. But wanted to wait. And not rush into it at the beginning of our marriage. The pregnancy was a surprise. But a very welcome and happy one. Throughout the pregnancy everything went very smoothly. There were never any signs of problems. We decorated the nursery together. And put up the furniture. We were so excited to meet our baby and be parents. She was carried to term and on the day of the birth. Everything was fine. She gave birth and we didn't hear any crying. We were so confused. And you could see in the doctor's eyes that they were very worried. I can't begin to describe the heartbreak. When they told us that our little girl hadn't made it. We got to hold her and she was so beautiful. A funeral parlor. 4 little angels. So we buried ours, just the 2 of us. I have never seen a coffin so small. I tried to be strong for my wife. I only cry when she's not there. So when she needs me, I am there. It's been hard to stay strong. Strong when she's crying in my arms. Seeing her like that makes the pain worse. Last night, I couldn't hold it in any longer and started making out with her. She didn't like it at all. She started saying that. I tried to make it about me. How I should be the man and support her. She also said that I had no right to be so upset. Upset. Because I wasn't the one who carried her and gave birth to her. She went to bed and left me there. I know she has it worse than I do. Because she carried and gave birth to our angel. I just didn't expect her to react like that. But I lost my daughter too. I wanted to be a father. I didn't get to change her nappy for the first time. And spend my first sleepless night with her crying. I lost her too. I know my wife is hurting. That's why she reacts the way she does. How can I be more supportive? But also let her know how I feel in a way that doesn't seem like I'm taking anything away from her. Your wife is toxic. You also loved and lost a child. Of course you have. You're going to be heartbroken by this situation. It's because of people like your wife that men just snap one day. Because people like her. Men don't have any right to human emotion. I'm sorry for your loss. You need to talk to your wife about therapy. Both separately and individually. I hope for your sake that she sees the mistake in the way she emotions in the future. You have seen firsthand what it's like to experience an instant loss of attraction. The same thing would have happened if it had been your cat that had died instead of your child. You have every right to grieve as much as your wife does. However, your wife now thinks you're weak. Whereas it's stupid to think. To show emotion would be seen as weakness. Yet many women believe it. So basically, you are no longer your wife's rock. That she can hang on to like an emotional tampon. You are no longer the strong, fatherly type she expects to shoulder all her tears. And is seemingly invulnerable to pain. It's a very distorted expectation from women who think that. Sorry, it's quite long. First of all, I would like to say, thanks for all the help and advice. I have tried to read as many comments as possible. It's a lot to wade through. And I appreciate the help. I have read a few comments that blamed me for my wife's reaction. And assumed that I had treated her pregnancy and birth as if it wasn't a big deal. I'm not sure where I implied that. When I say the pregnancy went smoothly, I mean that the doctors never found any medical problems. And that both my girls were healthy. I have never and will never dismiss this experience. If I treated everything they went through like it was no big deal, I wouldn't even be here asking how I could make things better for her. I have never even equated our pain. I think what I wrote is, I know she has it worse than I do. because she carried and gave birth to our angel. And I know my wife is in pain, which is why she reacts the way she does. How can I support her better, but also let her know how I feel, in a way that doesn't seem like I'm taking away from her? I'm not sure where I equated our pain. If anything, I am diminishing my own pain to support her. Or at least I try to. Even after what she said, I wasn't angry at her. I was hurt, but I wasn't angry. I know she said it out of pain. It still hurts. I didn't need to read that. I'm a piece of shit husband who doesn't care about my wife, because I'm also grieving the loss of our daughter. I see her every day. I see the pain she is in, I hear it. I can't begin to imagine it. And I will never be able to understand it. I know that what she is going through is worlds away from me. If I could take all her pain and put it on me, believe me, I would. No question. What I also don't want to read is that my wife is bad, and other countless mean words. That wasn't the point of my post. It wasn't to boost my ego and bash my wife. It's incredibly rude and unhelpful in every way. I asked a question because I was at a loss and didn't know how to proceed. My wife is not a bad person. She's an amazing woman, and she really deserves the world. She doesn't deserve this at all. Thank you to those of you who acknowledged what she said, but didn't speak ill of her. It doesn't make me feel any better to have people say those things about her. She's not offensive or a monster. It made me sick to read those comments. It's upsetting that I even have to say this. But it's the internet, I get it. Sorry for the rant. I just wanted to blow off some steam. I've always felt the need to be Superman. I lost my father when I was 16. And it was extremely hard on my mom and me. I had to be her rock then, or I would have lost her too. This caused me to act out in ways that people would call people around me. I've lost friends because of it. I held it in at home for my mom, and it came out in an ugly way. I can understand why my wife reacts the way she does, and I'm not going to leave her because of it. I wasn't planning to. I want to be there for her, but I don't think I can be there for her the way I have been. The way I have been. I can't carry the weight of both our pain on my shoulders anymore. I can barely hold on now. I feel like I'm in a speeding car, without a steering wheel or brakes. I haven't said anything to my wife about her comments, and I don't think I will now. I'm going to get some counseling to help me deal with this type of situation. I would also like to look into counseling for PPD. For my wife. I've heard stories about how heartbreaking it can be if it's not taken seriously. I don't want to imagine that. I hope we can find the help we both need, and that we can eventually get back together. Our friends and family have also been by her side. They call and text her a lot. Her mom and sister come over too. I'm glad she's getting extra support. I wish I could do more for her myself. It didn't occur to me how my crying around her could make her feel worse. I feel guilty now, like I'm letting her down. It would be nice to get a check from our loved ones once in a while, but she needs it more. So it's okay. I want her to get as much help as possible. I'll take the counseling. As stupid as it sounds, having strangers tell me it's okay to cry made me cry a little. The only person in my life who has told me that is my dad. Whenever I was hurt as a child, instead of telling me not to cry, he would say it's okay to do so. He's the kind of man and father I want to be. Hopefully with help from the outside, I will be stronger for my wife. Thank you again. I love my wife, and I want us to get through this and come out stronger together. I love my daughter and she will always be my firstborn. I will seek counseling for my wife and myself. She is terrible to say that to you. People often break up when there is infidelity involved, but sometimes a breakup should be considered. In cases like this, when something terribly hurtful is said, She wants to mourn alone. And doesn't take your feelings into account. Deleted. Your family should be supportive too. Stop being Superman again. And be honest that you're hurting. They don't get to tell you how to feel. None of them do. Not even your wife. Second story. I announced we were having a baby. And my entitled parents are demanding that we terminate the pregnancy. Because it's unfair to my sister. That I have a baby first. And we are not married yet. They even accused my girlfriend of cheating on me. Then my sister turned up at my house. Demanding that we give her our baby. Saying she was infertile. And lied to our parents the whole time. So I, 25, recently found out that my girlfriend is pregnant. Is pregnant. It wasn't planned. But honestly, it feels like one of the best things that's ever happened to me. We've been together for 3 years now. And even though we're not married yet, we've talked about building a future together. This baby feels like the beginning of that. My girlfriend was a bit nervous at first. This is a big step. But she's on board. And we've been making plans to get everything ready for our little one. This is our first child. I wanted to share the news with my family. I was brought up in a pretty traditional household. So I knew there might be some raised eyebrows because we were not married yet. But I thought, hey, a baby is a blessing, right? I didn't expect them to jump for joy. But I thought they'd at least be supportive. Boy, was I wrong. When I told my parents, their faces immediately turned. As if I'd just told them I was going to burn down their house or something. My mom was the first to speak, and her exact words were, "You have to get rid of it." I honestly thought I had misheard her. I just sort of froze for a second, and then I said, "What? Why would we do that? We're keeping the baby." That's when my dad came in. He said, "That's not fair to your sister. You know, she's been trying to have a baby for years. And now you go and get your out of wedlock. Do you even know if it's yours?" I was stunned. Completely stunned. First of all, my older sister, 28F. And I don't have a good relationship. She's always been the golden child in my parents' eyes. The perfect daughter. Married to a guy my parents absolutely adore. Meanwhile, I've always been the one who couldn't do anything right. Right in their eyes. I moved out when I was 18. Because I was tired of feeling like I didn't fit in. But I stayed in the same town to be close to my younger sister 20F. Who I get on well with. I know that my sister and her husband are struggling with infertility. And I feel for them, I really do. But how the hell is my child's existence unfair to her? It's not like I got my girlfriend just to spite her. And then there's the accusation of cheating. That really pissed me off. My girlfriend has never given me any reason to doubt her loyalty. And the fact that my parents would throw this out there without any evidence just shows how little respect they have for her and me. I told them straight out that the baby was mine. And that I was going to be a father. Whether they like it or not. That's when my mom started to cry. She said I was being selfish and disrespectful to the family. She said I should have thought about how affect the family before I put my girlfriend in that position. My father just sat there shaking his head and muttered about how we brought you up better than this. At that point I'd had enough. I told them that if they couldn't support me, then I didn't want them in my life. Or my child's life. Then I left when I got home. I felt completely exhausted. My younger sister rang me later that night and said she was happy for me and proud of me for standing up to our parents. She said she couldn't believe it. How cruel they were, and offered to help me and my friend in any way she could. It really meant a lot to me. But it also made me realize how messed up my family dynamic is. I haven't told my girlfriend what happened yet. Part of me feels like I should. She has a right to know. the kind of people my parents are. But another part of me wants to spare her the stress. At least for now. She's already with the challenges of an unplanned pregnancy. I don't want to add to her worries. At the same time, I'm worried that my parents might try to take matters into their own hands. They know where I live. And although they've never turned up uninvited before, I wouldn't put it past them to do something drastic. Like confronting my girlfriend. I'm torn about what to do. Should I tell my girlfriend the truth about what my parents said? Or should I just cut my parents off and give her a more neutral explanation as to why they're not involved? And how do I protect her and our child if my parents decide to escalate things? Update. I thought my parents' reaction to the pregnancy would be the worst. But I was wrong. It turns out, if you give toxic people an inch, they take a mile and then some. The very next day after my fight with my parents, my older sister and her husband turned up at my house unannounced. I hadn't told them I was pregnant, so it was obvious that my parents had called them right after our fight. I should have been prepared for this. When I opened the door, my sister looked like she was barely holding it together. She was flushed. Her hands were shaking. And her husband was standing behind her, staring at me with a mixture of anger and impatience. Before I could say a word, my sister rushed past me into the house. "I need to talk to you now," she said. I could hear the tension in her voice. And it wasn't long before she spilled the beans. Apparently my sister had been struggling with infertility for years. While I'd known that she and her husband were having trouble conceiving, I had no idea how bad it had become. She admitted that they'd had several failed IVF treatments, expensive procedures and endless doctor's appointments, only to be told she couldn't have children naturally. She said she had never told my parents the full extent of her infertility, because she didn't want to hurt them or deal with their pity. That would have been enough to make me feel sorry for her. But what came next wiped out any sympathy I might have had. She started telling me that because my girlfriend and I weren't married, and the pregnancy was unplanned, it made perfect sense for us to give the baby to her and her husband. She said they were ready to be parents, and that they'd always wanted children. So why not help them by letting them raise the baby instead? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My girlfriend and I hadn't even had a chance to fully celebrate the pregnancy ourselves. And here was my sister trying to swoop in and take our child away, like it was a parcel she'd ordered online. She must have sensed my shock, because she shifted gears and started guilt and told me that her husband had fed up with her inability to conceive, and that their marriage was under strain because of this. She said that his family, her in-laws, were constantly pressuring her to have a baby, and began to treat her like a failure for not being able to give them a grandchild. She even said, "If I can't give him a baby, I don't know how long he'll stay with me. This could save my marriage." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there stunned as she went on. She went on about how much it would mean to her, how she was going to make sure the baby had everything they could ever want, and how she'd still let me and my friend be a part of the baby's life. She kept throwing around phrases like family sacrifice and what's best for everyone, as if that would somehow make me forget that she was asking me to give up my own child. Her husband, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. He didn't even try to hide his anger. He told me I was being selfish for refusing to consider her situation, and that I should man up and think about how much better off having the baby with them. He even implied that we'd be doing the baby a favor by giving them up, because we didn't have the same financial stability that he and my sister had. At this point my friend came out of the bedroom. She had been resting after feeling sick that morning, but must have heard enough to find out what was going on. She went into the living room. She took one look at my sister and her husband, and immediately asked, "What's going on?" Before I could explain, my sister jumped in and started repeating her pitch to my friend, practically begging her to do the right thing and let her raise the baby. She even tried to play the sympathy card again by saying that my friend was young and could always have more children later. I could see my friend's expression go from confusion to anger in an instant. She put her hand on her stomach, looked my sister dead in the eye, and told her there was no way in hell she was giving up her baby. She was giving up her baby. She said she couldn't believe it. My sister had the audacity to even suggest such a thing, let alone showing up at our house uninvited to guilt trip us. My sister tried to argue that we weren't thinking clearly, and that she was just trying to make sure the baby had the best life possible. She said it was about doing what's right for the family. But my friend cut her off. She told my sister to get out of our house and not to come back. At first my sister refused to go. She started crying and screaming and saying things like, "You're tearing this family apart, and you'll regret it when the baby is born." Her husband tried to calm her down, but my friend wouldn't have any of it. She told them that if they didn't leave immediately, she would call the police. That did the trick. My sister stormed out. Still crying, her husband followed, staring at me as if I were the villain in the piece. As they left, my sister said, "Don't expect me to be there for you when you realize you've made a mistake." As the door finally closed, my friend turned to me, visibly shaken. She told me she couldn't stay here any longer. Not with my family behaving like this. She said she had to go somewhere safe. Somewhere where she'd be supported. And I couldn't argue with her. That night, we decided together that she would go with her parents in her hometown, while I sorted things out here. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I have to end my life here, cut the ties with my toxic family, and move to their town so we can start afresh together. We have also made another big decision. We're getting married. It won't be a big wedding. Just a small, with a few close friends and her family. My younger sister will be the only person invited from my side. She's been incredibly supportive throughout this whole thing, and I know I can count on her to respect our boundaries. As for my parents and older sister, they're done. I've changed the locks. I installed a security system and blocked their numbers. They've shown me exactly where their priorities lie, and I refused to let them poison my future. Third story. A colleague sent me her naked picture, followed by an apology. So I reported her to HR to protect myself. I'm 32, the general manager of a corporate franchise breakfast restaurant. It's basically just me in management and housekeeping. I have 2 kitchen managers, but they are more lead chefs than anything else. I do all the scheduling, hearings, firings, disciplinary stuff, etc. It is corporate. So I have a regional director, and there is an HR department at the head office. One of my kitchen staff, 40s F, has just sent me a picture of her breasts, followed by an apology, and that she won't be coming in tomorrow. What do I do from here? I'm thinking, of course, I'll call HR on Monday morning and report this through them. What do I do beyond that? How do I fully protect myself in this situation? Hennessy underlines Carter. It could have been a real accident. I've accidentally sent people messages meant for other people before. These things happen. I would report it to HR immediately. But you need to find out if it was an accident or not. No. Almost certainly an accident. Yes. No inclination of interest otherwise. And she seemed Embarrassed to call for tomorrow. I don't see the play otherwise. OP responds to some ideas about keeping personal and work apps separate. You make a very good point. And you may have just solved 2 problems for me. I have a hard time letting my staff read text messages. I tell them I'm always easily accessible and prefer texts, because my service is sometimes interrupted, and I can filter how urgent it is. But it does get tiring being constantly contacted on my days off. A separate messaging service could solve both problems. Keep work messages separate, and not feel so bad about having to wait until I'm back in the office to answer non-urgent stuff, and avoid this kind of mix-up in the future. There are no accidental nudity in the work messaging app. 5 days later. Hello fellow managers. I posted a few days ago asking for advice because I had received a picture of her topless from an employee, followed by an apology. I got a lot of great replies. Most people said what I was thinking: cover up and report it to HR. A lot of people suggested I let it go and do nothing except let the employee know that I knew it was an accident and deleted it. And then a handful of people who couldn't understand why anyone would report this said I was a bad person for even thinking it. And a bunch of questions and comments about the breasts themselves, asking to see them, if they were nice, etc. You know. Pretty much par for the course on the internet. I felt I should give you an update. I ended up emailing HR the next morning, telling them what had happened and asking for advice. This was on a Sunday morning. I also sent a text to my HR representative to let them know that I had emailed them. HR got back to me soon after. The gist of the email they sent me was, you should meet with the employee in question, with a witness, and let them know the possible consequences of their actions. Tell them about the risks of posting such images on the internet. Remind them that they last forever, and that once they are out there, they have no control over what happens to those images, and the potential impact on the person who receives them. Who receives them? If someone else, like a partner or a boss, sees these images on someone's device, let them know that you will put a disciplinary notice on their record, reaffirm the seriousness of their actions, and let them know there will be consequences if it happens again in the future. In an effort to maintain the integrity of the employee to her colleagues, and in an attempt to alleviate some of the embarrassment of the situation, I didn't want to involve one of the kitchen managers into the situation, apart from the fact that they are both male. So I arranged for to come down and meet her with me on the first shift. On the first shift back after their weekend. My HR rep is also female, which I felt was more appropriate than to meet her with another man. I asked HR to meet me in a cafe across the street, just to avoid any questions from staff, or any chance of being overheard. There isn't much room for 3 people in my tiny office, and I didn't want to sit in the dining room and risk being overheard. Risk of being overheard. Or the employee was more embarrassed than necessary. The employee was admittedly embarrassed, but was very receptive and appreciative of the way we handled it. She was convinced that I would let her go. We reiterated that we were not just crossing the T's and dotting the I's. I couldn't not report this, but I didn't want to put anyone in the loop. She has to work with it. So HR is here. I showed her my phone, reassured her that it was deleted immediately, not shown to anyone. But since this is a company, I had no choice but to put what had happened on paper. All in all, she had no problem signing her warning. It was a good way to bury the hatchet and remove the awkwardness. And I feel much better knowing that the situation is completely above board. I think everyone sleeps better at night because of the way it was handled. But let me tell you, I have lost a lot of sleep over it the last few nights. I imagine she has as well. Thanks everyone. Keep it classy. This is how HR works. But you don't just tell the staff, "Hey, you did this. Warn you not to do it again, sign here." You have to take them through the action. The policy they broke by doing it. The reason for the policy. The immediate consequences of their action. The potential risks of the action. And the consequences of repeating it. Example. If someone is late, you don't just say, "Hey, you were late. Here is a piece of paper that says you were late. Sign it instead." You highlight the attendance policy they have agreed to. Mark the date. The date and time of their breach of the policy. The impact it has had on your teammates and the company as a whole. The consequences of continuing the behavior. And a time and date to meet again. To ensure compliance with the policy. Commentator 1, I like the action you took to avoid embarrassing them and preserve the relationship. Commenter 2, I must say I think you handled this perfectly. I love how you took steps to make her feel more comfortable and not embarrassed, and met in a different place to preserve her dignity. This is an example of exactly of how these situations should be handled.